Now we will go to public input from Mark Lockhart from the Tree Council. Welcome, Mark. Thank you. You've got a presentation from Mark. And Mark, we've received your presentation and we've got that up now. And you're here to discuss notable trees, which is item 10. In your hands, Mark.
Thank you. My name's Mark Lockhart. I'm a board member with the Tree Council, and I'm standing in for Mel's Barton, who is unable to make it today. The agenda report states this requires a substantial commitment by Council to ensuring the protection of any notable trees or groups of trees which meet the AUP notable tree criteria. There are many such trees, over 500, already nominated and assessed by Council as meeting the criteria, but which are not currently protected. These trees must be added to Schedule 10 as soon as possible to ensure their protection. In addition, there will be other trees across the city that can qualify for scheduling, but which are currently unprotected. We must find and protect these trees now. There is no other way to protect significant trees under the current planning scheme. There's no interim protection for these trees, and many of the trees have been on the list for years. If the land changes hands, these trees can simply be removed. Many of the trees have already been lost. I'd be interested to know whether there's any record or assessment of that. If the Council is serious about making any attempt to prevent further destruction of the most important trees in the city, then opening the new schedule to new nominations is essential. If this does not happen, these trees will most definitely be lost as development intensifies in future years. These are by definition the largest, most significant trees in Auckland. Only the best of the best can qualify for Schedule 10 notable trees. The recommended option 5 means that nothing will be added to the schedule. So to close the door on new nominations and on adding nominations that already qualify is to state that Auckland Council has no interest or responsibility to protect the most significant trees in Auckland. Is that the legacy you wish to leave future generations? Large trees are particularly vulnerable and will be lost for a generation if they're not protected. There are 5 options presented by Council. I'll take those as read. Missing is option 6, which is a hybrid approach which incorporates options 2 and 3. Option 5, the do nothing option, is totally irresponsible and will result in the loss of significant public assets which Council is aware both qualify for scheduling and have been formally nominated. Please take the opportunity now to prevent the inevitable destruction of Auckland's last remaining significant trees that can qualify for Schedule 10 notable trees. Please support this new recommendation. Option 6, hybrid approach which incorporates options 1, 2 and 3. Prepare a plan change to add existing nominations which merit inclusion to Schedule 10 and correct any new errors or inconsistencies that have been identified, and in addition call for further nominations from the public to expand Schedule 10 and Appendix 1G, while also commencing an incremental review of Schedule 10 and Appendix 1G. At the very least, the 500 trees that have been nominated and qualify should be added to the schedule. This is a photo of Canal Road which shows a scale of trees which will be potentially lost if Council doesn't act. I have lay people asking me more and more what is happening to the trees in our city. They just can't understand why trees are being removed all over the show, and they're blissfully aware of the fact that in 2012 tree protection rules were removed and are shocked by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. So questions of Mark on behalf of the Tree Council here, standing in from good old Mel's, acknowledgement to Mel's, and questions please, members. Councillor Cooper first.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. I actually when I'm re-looking at these recommendations, when I looked at it, I thought, oh, doing option 4, that's the recommendation. But when I dig deeper, it is option 5. It is do nothing. So I suppose that's, I guess my question is, why is it not so clear in here? Because I'm a bit, as I read through it, I mean, I can see further, and it says earlier, oh, we recommend to basically do nothing, but the recommendations aren't particularly clear. So
Can we come to that at the
Yeah.
report rather than
Okay.
ask Mark that? I know exactly what you're referring to.
So, okay, the question is, so if we did go for option 4, is that at least, I mean, would you be comfortable with that, or is that as some sort of compromise? Which was to review the existing schedule and take on the nominations, the current nominations.
It's certainly better than option 5, the do nothing option. As indicated, option 6 is our preferred option, obviously, but that is significantly better than option 5.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are there other questions, members of Mark? Deputy Mayor, please.
Would you open this mark up to all trees, or just natives, or trees of user system to sort that out?
That would apply to all trees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker.
Well, has the Tree Council got any resource it could make available to assist in this process that you're suggesting? Because part of the problem we've got is the council is very resource constrained, quite obviously. If you can assist with the identification of various trees and so on in a collaborative way, and the council's looking at partnerships, that could fast track things.
Yeah, just before Mark asks that, I'm sure that the Tree Council can make submissions, etc. But this, when something requires a plan change, you actually rely on the resources of this council and the resources that you can contract in as well, councillor. It's not. I mean, I'll ask the Director of Strategy here to comment on this.
I was actually directing my question
Yeah,
to Mr.
I know.
Lockhart, who's the submitter, not to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If that's possible.
It is possible, and I'm responding.
But you spoke earlier about time. I'm trying to keep things simple and just get a direct answer from the submitter.
Yes, and I'm sure Mark will tell us his organisation is very willing to contribute through the channels that are provided to them. Mark.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Director of Strategy, do you want to just comment on that? Because I've heard it a bit, that you can somehow just involve groups to participate in a regulatory process of working up a plan change. Can you just tell us what the parameters are here, please?
Thanks through the chair. Look, the work would need to be done by council staff, and that could include contracted staff if that's what we choose. But that's under a contract and a management framework for that work. However, the public are involved, or particularly interested parties are involved through the submission process. But sometimes we also do, pre-formal process submissions and opportunities to get involved. So it really depends on the issues and the way in which we might want to engage on an issue. But in terms of preparing advice to whether it's elected members or hearing panel, that would need to be done by staff, or if it's not by staff, through a contract procurement process on behalf of the council staff.
Thank you for that. Our last question, Councillor Newman, please.
Good morning. As a matter of principle, is it your contention that stakeholders, the public, interested parties, should be able to go along and to identify a tree that they consider notable for consideration and inclusion on a schedule if that tree is on private property and the landowner doesn't consent to that?
It's a difficult question. I think it's important that the most significant trees in our community are identified, and how you deal with that from the perspective that it's on private property is very difficult. That's exactly what's happening at Canal Road. I guess one final observation I'll make is that previously, when properties were purchased, a potential purchaser was aware of what trees were on the property, and they actually factored that into their due diligence, and now that doesn't happen. So, you know, I think there's an onus on the private property owners to actually be aware and acknowledge that they have a significant tree on their property. It's, and I'm not sure how you factor that in and how that relates to your question. But.
Yeah, actually, I don't think you answered my question. My question was specific. If that tree should be able to be notified and scheduled without the property owner's consent.
Yes, I think it should be identified. Trees should be able to be identified on private properties. And scheduling is a process, I understand, yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mark. They're all the questions. Thanks for your submission again, and always Tree Council make a huge effort in this regard. Massively committed. We appreciate that. Thank you. Item 10, it's on page 51, Auckland Unitary Plan, Schedule 10. This is the notable tree schedule review. Now, the officers for this, Teuila Young, Policy Planner, and Phil Reid, Manager, Auckland-wide Planning, and both from the Plans and Places Office. So this is at page 51, members. Teuila, we've read the report. Now, you've got a short presentation for us, and please proceed with that.
Kia ora koutou and talofa lava. I'm here this afternoon to speak to a report which discusses the options available to Council when considering the Auckland Unitary Plan Notable Tree Schedule. Council's principal regulatory technique for managing and protecting trees is the Auckland Unitary Plan and Hauraki Gulf Islands District Plan. These are supported by a suite of non-regulatory council and private initiatives under Auckland's urban ngahere strategy that contribute to the management and protection of trees. Tree schedules are highly dynamic in nature, meaning they change over time and are not as easily maintained as other schedules which are static. Subdivision, development, consents for removal and alteration, as well as emergency works affect the listings in the schedules. This means the listings fall out of date over time. A long-term approach is required to ensure the integrity and reliability of these schedules and the continued protection and management of Auckland's notable trees. This report identifies options available to Council which will assist in responding to concerns raised by the community about the loss of trees or groups of trees in the region and the lack of protection for identified significant trees. I will now discuss some additional matters to provide context and background. General tree protection rules meant that property owners had to apply for a resource consent to remove large native and exotic trees in most parts of Auckland. In 2012, an amendment was made to the RMA which removed this protection in urban areas. This limited Council's ability to protect trees in urban areas, other than those specifically identified on a schedule. There are other mechanisms available to Council through the RMA which enable Council's protection of significant ecological areas and other groups of trees. However, these are on a regional basis and can only be applied if they are based on regional functions, such as natural hazard management or the maintenance of Indigenous biodiversity. At a district plan level, tree protection in urban areas can only occur through notable tree scheduling. Auckland's tree schedules protect a small number of trees in comparison to the protection that general tree protection could provide. I note that the RMA Reform Panel recommendations released in June this year are silent on the matter of general tree protection and whether the new system should specifically rule out the use of the General Tree Protection District Rule. Council's urban ngahere strategy provides a framework for managing the ngahere. This is the central policy vehicle for managing and growing Auckland's urban forest. Listings on Schedule 10 of the Auckland Unitary Plan make up 1 to 1.5% of the total urban forest cover. Council has a range of regulatory tools to protect the urban ngahere, which can be applied to trees and vegetation on private properties. However, since amendments to the RMA came into effect in 2012, councils depend mainly on non-regulatory tools to control the removal of trees and vegetation on private properties. While the loss of scheduled trees is often significant in the local context, it may not be a major ecological issue in the context of the urban ngahere, because of the low percentage of total forest cover and the presence of additional regulatory tools which protect the urban ngahere. Before councils were amalgamated and the Auckland Unitary Plan was created, each legacy council had its own schedule of notable trees. As part of the development of the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan, these schedules were consolidated to form Schedule 10, except for HDI Schedule Appendix 1G, which remains embedded in the HDI plan. Many of these schedules had not been updated for some time, and Council may have limited information associated with some of the listings. Unfortunately, some records are poor, and the information held becomes increasingly out of date. A total of 519 submissions were made under the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan, requesting that additional trees be added to the schedule. However, no supplementary evidence or information was provided with those suggestions, and so these were unsuccessful in being added. Since the AUP became operative in part in 2016, a further 68 unsolicited nominations have also been received. All of these nominations remain unaddressed in the database held by Plans and Places. Since the AUP became operative in part, Schedule 10 has been amended once via Plan Change 29. This was an administrative plan change which amended errors and inconsistencies in the schedule text and maps with the intention of providing clarity for plan users and property owners about the location, number, and species of scheduled trees on the property. Plan Change 29 did not add to or reevaluate existing trees on the schedule. The Planning Committee resolution for this plan change meant it was not considered appropriate to open up the schedule to additions or removals concurrently with the fixing of errors and inconsistencies. A hearing was held for PC 29 in September, and the decision is yet to be notified. As a local authority, the RMA requires that Auckland Council commence the review of the AUP before November 2026. The notification date for the reviewed AUP must be before April 2029. Plans and Places is currently engaged in the preparation of the 5-year monitoring of the efficiency and effectiveness of the AUP, and that is an important precursor to its review. It is important that Council has a comprehensive understanding of the contents of each of its schedules before the review commences. So the current situation. The AUP now contains 6,000 to 7,000 notable trees, some of which Council may have limited information about. There are many factors which contribute to the schedule becoming increasingly out of date, such as extreme weather events, tree age, tree health, development, and subdivision. And because of this, errors and inconsistencies in the schedule continue to be identified. Nominations received through the port process and further unsolicited nominations received over the last 4 years have not been addressed. There is an expectation from the community that these will be addressed. The ability still exists to nominate trees for scheduling, and this database will continue to grow and become a larger task to address in the future. This report identifies 5 options available to Council, which address the issues identified in the previous slide. Option 1 involves preparing a plan change to add existing nominations which merit inclusion to Schedule 10 and correct any newly identified errors and inconsistencies. Option 2 is to prepare a plan change which, in addition to Option 1, calls for further nominations from the public to expand Schedule 10. Option 3 undertakes over a 5-year time period a full review of existing Schedule 10 and Appendix 1G. Option 4 is a hybrid approach, which incorporates aspects of options 1 and 3 by preparing a plan change to add nominated trees to Schedule 10 and correct newly identified errors and inconsistencies, while also commencing an incremental review of Schedule 10 and Appendix 1G. Each of these options have considerable financial implications. These costs cannot be met within current departmental budgets, and plans and places do not have the resources available to undertake these options. Option 5 relies on the existing Schedule 10 and Appendix 1G while continuing to monitor their effectiveness, together with continuing to request that the government consider changes to New Zealand's resource management system to enable the council to reinstate some form of general tree protection. There are no additional costs to council associated with the status quo option. And as such, the report recommendations note that option 4, the hybrid approach, is the most cost-effective way to undertake the review of the notable tree schedules, add trees to the schedule, and correct any newly identified errors and inconsistencies. The recommendations also acknowledge that it is not financially viable to review or make changes to the notable tree schedules at this point in time. The recommendations also agree that future submissions on resource management reform should continue to request that the government consider changes to enable the council to reinstate some form of general tree protection. Kia ora, thank you for listening. I'm now prepared for questions.
Thank you, Teuila. Now, members, we've got staff recommendations on our agenda here. If I have a mover or a seconder for that. I have a question from Councillor Fletcher first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For me, tree protection is a really important issue, and I am genuinely surprised that, given the numbers of workshops we have, that we haven't workshopped this, or perhaps I was away. Can you advise, please, whether or not this matter has been workshopped?
Not through the chair, not by plans and places, but I'm not entirely sure in relation to the urban Ngāhere strategy whether or not notable tree protection was actually part of discussions for that.
I can confirm. Mr. Chairman, I have real difficulty with voting on this option today as somebody who has followed tree protection for a considerable period of time. And frankly, whether there is funding or not within the staff that would have to conduct this work is actually, it's important, but it's irrelevant for us in terms of the policy parameters, as we've discussed in earlier items today. I would like to know what there is urgency because trees are going down across Auckland, I understand. But in terms of getting the right policy parameters for this, why has there not been some preliminary work done amongst ourselves so that everybody can understand the consequences of what the decisions that we might take today might be?
I'll get the Chief of Strategy to clarify, because there was some discussion at Environment and Climate Change some time ago. There is some crossovers here between the jurisdictions, but I'll get the Director of Strategy to clarify on that query.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so there is some, this has gone through Environment and Climate Change Committee as well, and probably even in the previous term, a little bit through the urban Ngāhere. We have not, and has come to this committee because it is a unitary plan related matter specifically, or a tool, a method, as opposed to some other methods that might be more general. There has not been a specific workshop on this matter, mainly from the staff's perspective, because we just have not found any time. We felt that we needed to report back to you as per the resolution that came through Environment and Climate Change Committee, and we made a decision to do that without being able to find time for a workshop. So that has been our decision on that. Yep.
As one of my favourite officers, I'm not going to berate you, but I do feel that this warrants some further informal discussion before we take a vote on it.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. And also, just in terms of workshop time, there is no workshop time available until the new year right now. A lot of it, as one agrees, needs to be given to Finance Performance Committee to address the budget. But there are a number of subjects that as chair, I've been hunting for workshop time, and it's been made clear to me it's not available. So this is not coming to us for the first time. It has been discussed before, but from a planning perspective, it is here for the first time.
But why could it not at least be socialised with our meeting with the Mayor? You know, on something that is, I think, that important, that we can discuss it informally, briefly. I just feel that it does need to land. Trees are always controversial. I'd like to see us be able to try and come together on something as much as possible that is going to be workable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I'd love to move this, but I actually keep hearing, I mean, I get letters from Mel's Barton and all sorts all the time, and she's one of my constituents. So, and we've had some big concerns around the trees. And I guess can you just tell me, in terms of option one, which would be to at least look at all the nominated trees now, and do that. It feels like it's only a token, I know, but at least it's several, 587 trees, which is better than none. Or do you think people will just quickly chop them down before we get the plan change through if they get wind of it? Yeah, I just wonder about, I've looked at the report, but I really think there's a lot of public call for us to protect trees more than we are now. And we've all agonised over Canal Road. We've absolutely agonised over it because I'd love to protect those trees. You just don't have, how many $1 million to buy it. So it's probably a repetition, but could you just sort of give me your view on whether it's even doable, or maybe it's Madam Teuila who's got the purse strings there could answer that, because it's only 871 million as opposed to 3 million.
Chief of Strategy.
Through the chair, look, to Councillor Fletcher's point and yours, Councillor Cooper, I completely understand and know the scope of this issue and how difficult it can be. We are trying to be real and honest with you around both costs and time, and this really is something that both for us but for you, it's part of your prioritisation conversation, really. So yes, of course, you can see in the options we've given you a sense of the different costs. Of course, we could review just the nominations we have in there, and it would cost, just under $1 million. Yep. Yeah. We would need to prioritise both that money and that time, and would ensure that we would not do some other things. You'd either want to know what they are, or we'd have to let you know. So this is not us trying to be unhelpful. It's just difficult. It takes time and money, and we just want to be honest with you about that.
Okay, then just a supplementary. So has anybody got a view on why, even though the government criticised the 2012 amendment to the RMA, they have not changed it in the last few years and doesn't look like they're going to change it?
There is going to clearly be reform of the resource management environment and act. It may well be part of that, but I don't have any intel specifically about
was it signalled?
Beyond. Phil, was it signalled?
Through the chair, there was a ministerial letters that came in to form the scope of reference for the RMA reform panel. And from those ministerial letters, there was a letter from James Shaw that did call for the panel to address the issue of general tree protection. But the report was silent on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Walker, please.
I just want to agree here with Councillor Fletcher. I'm really disturbed that we've got an agenda item before us that, well, I really don't want to be too critical, but it is somewhat lacking. So, for example, there are methodologies for valuing trees. I mean, one of the means that they use in the UK is the Halliwell scale. There are a variety of scales. And mature trees, particularly trees of significance, are accepted internationally as being of the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Some of these trees, particularly if they've got other associations, because you know, they might have been planted by Sir John Logan Campbell or whatever, are frankly irreplaceable. I would have expected at the least that there could have been some analysis of maybe particular trees, because many of these trees are frankly unique. They're quite unique because of their setting.
Sorry, we're taking questions. That's quite a lot of comment.
So, one, has there been any consideration of the value of trees, for example, Halliwell scale or other scales? Two, has there been any consideration of even a plan change that might protect particular trees? Have we sought feedback from local boards about particular trees? Have we analysed what the threat to these trees are, particularly given the nature of the change to the RMA? Have we assessed the value of these trees in terms of the urban landscape and property values? Because there's a clear correlation between trees and property values across Auckland and livability. And I could ask even more questions. I'm not going to, Mr. Chair.
How about we put that one question?
I am not going to, Mr. Chair, but what I am indicating to other councillors is that this is a very serious matter. If we have to put this off, then I think it's better to put it off and consider it in the round than as it's proposed now.
Okay, look, Councillor, I've given you quite a bit of freedom to ask a question there. I think there was one in there. Now,
Well, I listed in 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
I think I got up to 5 questions.
Okay, it would be really, I don't know whether Mr. Reid recalls what the questions are, but I'll give them a go. So members, just prior to this agenda, I've received no contact from any member raising concern about the paper actually appearing. So please, if you have concern about a paper appearing, it's really good to let the chair or the deputy chair know about it. You know, when the agenda hits and you glance at that agenda and you think to yourself, well, that's premature. Now, these questions around notable trees have been raised. They've been raised at finance, and they've been raised also at environment and climate change. And Mayor, I remember you asking for a breakdown of this 1484 number. And there was actually quite a lot of exchange between the Mayor and I can't remember who it was, maybe it was Mr. Reid. This is not coming to us cold. There have been lots of warm-up acts on this, and I remind members again, I've received no notification that this report is premature. Now, I know sometimes things, you know, we don't like them and we'd like to put them off, but sometimes we just actually have to deal with them. So Phil, do you have any reply to the question or questions that Councillor Walker put?
Through the Chair, I'll talk to the valuation of trees matter first. So within the Auckland region, there's been a variety of different techniques that have been used through the years to actually evaluate trees. And in going into the preparation of the unitary plan, we arrived at an evaluation system which was a scoring-based system. Through submissions to the unitary plan, there were other techniques that were put to the panel for that evaluation, including monetarised systems. The regional policy statement contains what are the criteria that are used to evaluate trees to deserve to go onto the notable tree schedule. So when we progress a plan change to the unitary plan schedule, we must give effect to those criteria that sit within the regional policy statement. So we would need to be doing not only a change to the schedule, but also to the regional policy statement itself if we were looking to move from the current scoring system to one which was more of a monetarised system. The second point on that, though, relates to the Section 32 analysis, which is needed to support progressing a plan change for the protection of notable trees. And one of the considerations are the extent to which there is a benefit to amenity values of the owners and adjoining property owners. And amenity values are a basket of enjoyments that are shared by neighbours or by an owner. And that basket of amenity values is one of the most significant contributing factors to things such as the Halliwell system, which provides for the monetarisation of value. So in a roundabout way, there is a consideration of those different extents of benefit that come. Now, there were other questions which related to progressing a plan change which protected particular trees. And this is potentially the issue that we face, where the submissions that came into the unitary plan didn't contain accompanying information to enable us to be able to actually look at prime examples of trees which potentially had commemorative value or some sort of outstanding aspect to them that could warrant being able to actually go out of the ordinary and find everything out about those trees. There was a procedural minute that was issued by the chair of the hearing panel, calling on those that made those submissions to come forward with what the accompanying evidence was to enable a fuller consideration. Unfortunately, there were very few people that did actually come forward with that information to enable additional trees to go onto the schedule at that time. So most of those submissions became parked and have been parked since that time. Potentially within there are examples of what you speak about, of outstanding examples of trees. But we would have to go through those, which is part of the consideration of this report, in order to be able to pick out those gems that are in there. The next point you raised, I think, was in relation to local board feedback. There's probably two angles to this. One is the work which the Research, Investigation and Monitoring Unit have been doing in relation to looking through the urban Ngāhere strategy at the urban vegetative cover. And that work has engaged back with local boards to talk about examples of where larger, more mature trees are potentially falling away and disappearing, and we're getting more of a predominance of smaller trees through. So there's a little bit of dialogue going on there, but I would say that if we were to receive a resolution which pushed us towards proceeding with the plan change, then the dialogue with local boards, together with dialogue with iwi, together with dialogue with community groups, residents groups, Tree Council, Forest and Bird, etc., that would become a full consultation plan that we would enter into.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, my question is to Megan, and how did this paper get through finance? Because the financial implications are part of this paper says the status quo option for managing, protecting Auckland's notable trees can be managed within existing council budgets. The 4 additional options would require additional funds, and the option suggested requires additional funds. Now, if you think I'm the bad cop today, wait till you hear what's coming next week, team, all right? And I actually support Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Walker. I'll apologise to you. I've been a bit busy doing my own stuff, let alone looking at yours. But I'm telling you to put a report through now that asks for more money when you have no idea of the challenges and everything else that we have to face is potentially unwise financially. Now, I'm just putting it out there, and if we could delay it might be helpful when we have a look at it in the context.
Through the chair, if I could just confirm, you're absolutely right, Councillor Simpson. If this report was asking for money, well, it wouldn't have gone up for a start. So this is not. What it is saying is we're reflecting that while option 4 might be the most cost-effective way to deal with it, we are saying we can't afford it and therefore status quo remains, and we're not asking for any more money. So it's okay. So, and we did run that past finance. We wanted to make it clear what our
Apologies.
a way to do it, but the financial implications.
Apologies, I read point 47 and saw the cost.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit difficult to read, but if you read the B, it sort of overrides the A, and there are no financial implications that you'll have to deal with. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. And first of all, I'd
congratulate the officer on her delivery of this paper. Is actually very clear and very logical, quite noticeably so in a number of reports that are delivered to us in our time sitting at these tables. So thank you for that. My question just really goes to reinforce the notion that, you know, the song and a prayer motion, and that was the approach to the government. So what I heard there from Megan was there's actually nothing other than Mr. Shaw's a letter that he may have written to really show that there's any undertakings or possibilities there. I mean, we're starting fresh there, so that's a bit hopeful to say the least, isn't it, C? Well, the question is that, hey, there's not as if we've got some undertaking or there's something in train that would give us some hope there. We just have to go and approach them and see what happens. Like we're starting on snakes and ladder. We're on number one.
Well, through the chair, I think the difference that will happen this term is that there will be reform of the resource management system. This government has said it will happen. So there is an opportunity. Now, whether that is the government front foots that and puts something up for submissions, or whether it might be this council submission in the absence of anything specifically about trees to say there needs to be something about trees. So I believe that in this government term, and therefore most of this term, there will be an opportunity to speak directly to government about this.
So my follow question is, and it's a little unfortunate, I think, that the kind of progression here. So we have a statement that option 4 is the most cost-effective way to undertake a review, which to most lay people, members of the public reading that is saying, well, okay, so they're balancing up money and effectiveness, and you'd expect an appropriate decision, but we go back to, well no, sorry, it's not financially viable, so forget about cost effectiveness. So my question, Mr. Chair, and it's an important one from me, is my general perception of things is that there's loss of trees occurring, that it's a kind of Nero and his fiddle kind of scenario where Auckland Council's sitting, bemoaning the changes in 2012, but there's nothing actually happening on the ground to address that in a meaningful way. So is that a reasonable reading of the situation, notwithstanding what we've heard today? So that's a public perception. What I guess I'm asking is what comes out of any of these, out of the resolution today if passed, that goes to addressing that, and I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting a clear picture of what that is.
Okay, just to clarify, your question there is the rate of decline?
Yes, well, we're having specific incidents coming up of trees, and quite notable trees in their own way, that are going by the wayside. There's a notion since 2012 we've had an assault on, trees across Auckland. Our recommendation is a status quo. So I guess what I'm looking for is something in amongst that shows that there's something more happening than just sitting on the status quo.
Now, Teuila, I just can't put my finger on it, but you do, I've read in your report, the rate of decline and the percentage of canopy loss. I think you referenced it there somewhere, didn't you?
Oh, through the chair, the report does highlight that Schedule 10 contributes 1 to 1.5% of total urban canopy cover. I don't think I specifically mentioned the rate of decline.
That's what I was thinking about, yeah.
But as part of Plan Change 29, there was a lot of desktop analysis that happened where we were able to go through and find out how many trees had been lost, but that information had not been ground truth, so we can't definitively say what the decline has been.
Okay, so the current notable tree scheduled is about 1 to 1.5% of the Auckland canopy cover. And if we took on the extra 587 minimum, that would take it to what?
Through the chair, sorry.
Be a small percentage, would it?
Yeah, it would be just quite a small fraction, because there's currently 3,000 line items, so about 7,000 trees. So if we were to take on 500 more, it would be quite a small increase.
Okay. Councillor Coombe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora. Thanks for the report. Just in terms, well, I've got two questions. So just in terms of the website, and I see it has been updated to say that we're not progressing with any trees that are nominated. I just wonder if we've taken any advice on whether there are any obligations to do anything with those nominations that we've presumably been getting for the last 5 years.
Through the chair, no, we haven't sought legal advice on that, but I'm quite comfortable that we are not in a situation where we are legally liable for not progressing those nominations.
Thank you. And then just in terms of the recommendation, I do see in paragraph 65 that the next steps is to undertake a review when resources permit. And I presume that's basically option 4. Is that fair to say that that is what option 4 is? To the review of Schedule 10?
Just through the chair, an incremental review of Schedule 10 is option 3. And so that wasn't for the consideration of this report, the financing side of it.
No, but I'm just curious to know, because I in terms of the recommendation, I just find it odd that we're recognising that we have an issue, we need to do something about it, and then we're being asked to agree not to do it. And I just wondered if, responding to Councillor Fletcher's concern and knowing as well that this is a very, this is a big issue out there, and not wanting to kind of state something in the negative, is there a positive way that we can say that we would agree to undertake the review or make any changes to notable trees when resources permit, so that we're recognising that we all want to actually act rather than to say we're not going to do something? I just think the way that it's currently worded is not very helpful, and maybe
Okay, I think
Councillor Fletcher, if you...
Councillor Coombe's got a good point. Can I ask the staff to frame that B in a more positive manner? That's I think, what the council is asking
What
for.
I'm saying is it could say, and perhaps Councillor Fletcher, that might be a way, I mean, I'd potentially be happy, is agree to review or make changes to the notable tree schedules in the Auckland Unitary Plan and the Auckland District Plan when resources permit, which is essentially what
Okay.
the report says is next steps.
Never a good idea to try and work up a motion in a discussion. So I'm going to ask Councillor Coombe to work with the Chief of Strategy to frame those words up and then come back to us in a minute.
Okay, well, just to add to the question, because I'm just asking this as a question in terms of what the next steps potentially are, because I would have also thought, taken on into consideration what Councillor Simpson has reminded us about our financial position, is that this would be a discussion through the LTP, that we do actually want to do something when we can. So, and we might, find, local boards might find ways to progress this. I just feel uncomfortable that we're asking the community on one hand to to go into that, plug into that process, and then we're saying, sorry, we're just not going to do anything about it.
Can you work with the Chief of Strategy?
Well, I've given my suggestion
sorry,
already.
you need to sit down and, because, I'm sorry, Councillor Coombe, but it does not, it's, I know your intention, but I'm inviting you to just
I've
sit
done
down.
it, thank you, Chair. The
Working on it now, thank you.
Okay, I don't have anything in front of me right now. Meg off. Question?
Just a point of information, because people have been asking what the reply was from when we sent to the letter to David Parker, so I've just attached it. So I thought you might, is it appropriate for me to raise it here? I'm a bit nervous about taking it out of context now, Mr.
you were totally out of order.
I've been reprimanded once. He said, basically, this is the relevant paragraph. in receiving the report, Cabinet noted that further work will be required on urban tree protection, which will need to be considered by the next government. It will also take time to work through and understand the impact of the panel's proposals on local government. Therefore, I support the Ministry for the Environment's officials starting early engagement with councils on the matter of urban tree protection and the panel's proposals more generally. So it's quite a positive response, but still doesn't absolutely give us a time frame. But hopefully that is in order, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it confirms it's on the agenda, so that's good. Thank you. Well, that's a good update. Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment and some questions. So just saying that it never came to a workshop, I assume, because it can't, but it would be a lot easier if we had that opportunity. But I guess because it's a bit of a fait accompli, I guess that's why it's here. The reason, and it was the July committee that we sort of, and the Mayor didn't potentially believe the assertions of the cost. Not believe, but we just needed proof on paper to take back to the community around this. So I guess that's why it's here as part of those questions we put through on the Environment and Climate Change Committee. But I guess because we don't have the budget, there is no choice. My concern is if we put up a different recommendation without the finance. But my questions are, for me, so you're saying, so that the option is $2.5 million to basically potentially schedule 580 trees.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so that's 1,400 per tree. The other thing is, people can refuse to have a tree scheduled on their private property, right? Even with if we went through this property, they have to accept that tree on their property to be scheduled.
Through the Chair, through the unitary plan hearing process, that was not required. It was about the evidence that was in front of them about the value of the tree.
Okay.
And whether or not against the regional policy statement criteria it scored sufficiently highly enough. So the consideration of the property owner, if they were opposed to it, could have come forward through a further submission in opposition. But there was no right of veto that was granted to the owner to dispatch the ability to decide on whether it would become scheduled.
Okay. And what is the threshold for, and I guess you can't comment on each individual tree, but what is the threshold for someone to remove that tree anyway? So it's scheduled, they go through a process, but largely with scheduled trees, am I right that they can be removed anyway? It doesn't prevent someone removing them, but they can get consent to move.
That's right. There is always the power to apply for a resource consent to seek approval to be able to prune or remove a tree.
Okay, so yeah, so I guess I'll give a quick, brief comment. I won't speak again.
Not yet, because it's not moved. So let's put just before, if you can just hold there, and if we can put the B up, or put the new B up with the old B. If we can have a quick read, Councillor Coombe moving. Do I have a second? Councillor Hills, it's in your area as well. Do you want to consider seconding this?
I can't second that. I will give my comment.
Okay. Okay. People want to speak to it. Do I have a second, please? Okay, I'll second. Sorry, just got there before you, Councillor Walker. And a question about the motion.
Yeah, so by removing B, you're actually saying what the direction is. You're saying, no, we're not going to do it now. We're going to leave it as it is. So at the moment, you're just going noting and agree to review and make changes another time. You're not, at the moment, we're not putting a definitive. So what you're saying is you're removing the definitive that we're not doing anything now.
Sorry, who are you asking the question
Well,
of?
Councillor Coombe.
Am I allowed to respond? I mean, I'm just picking up what's actually in the report, that the report is saying is the next steps, that there will be action taken when the resources permit.
So you're taking out the reasons for why we're not, okay, it's just,
I just
I
would
think
like,
it's more airy-fairy, that's all. But
I thought it was trying to make it more action orientated. So this is saying
we know the way forward, this is what we want to do. So we can respond and say, yep, we are going to do something, we're going to notify the trees when we can find the resources. Because if we pass the recommended B, it is just putting a stop to everything.
So it's, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's trying to make it a positive statement rather than just a...
It's more positively framed, and it's still acknowledging the A. So subject to having the resources, you would go about it and following the direction as outlined in the A, the hybrid approach. So it's just more positively framed. It's not substantially different. Okay, got it. Councillor Newman, please.
Well, yeah, Chair. I mean, respectfully, I had some questions on this, but now I'm wondering, I mean, how do we get sort of through committee fed at a planning committee, a matter which I think should be addressed at a finance discussion, actually, if we're going to resource our own work program, or if we're going to do it this way, there are some other outstanding work programs with the resolution, for example, the marina strategy that hasn't been addressed. So should we add that to the schedule too, so we can get that one underway, given that we're resourcing the work streams in order to progress resolutions? That's a question. It's a direct question, Chair, because I'm very confused as to how this has all come about.
Question for the staff, not for me. So is that with, I don't think that's with Phil. I think it's with the Chief of Strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's exactly why we recommended, or in our recommendations, that we can't afford to do the work now, and that we unless you change things, either money or priorities. Same thing goes for marina strategy. If and when you want to talk to us about that, we don't have the resource to do that. If you want us to prioritise that, then other things are going to fall off. So it's the same theory, and this new additional change would still mean that we won't do it. It would be when resources permit. And that could be some time away. It could be part of the resource management reform if the government makes changes, for example, in the next couple of years, and adds it to the new, whatever new legislation that might be. That might automatically happen. It might be something we would have to do anyway. I don't know. So there are various ways this could happen, but it could well take years. I can't see this as being something we can resource quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, Megan, respectfully speaking to that, I mean, we could, for example, plan space travel to the moon. We could resolve that matter, but we can never afford to do it. So it's not practical to pass resolutions that have absolutely no meaning whatsoever. You can't apply a resource to it. It's a Clayton's exercise to, I assume, make us feel better about ourselves. Chair, I had some questions to the officers. So coming back to the intent of what the Resource Management Act says right now, it doesn't provide for blanket tree protection, does it? So what we're talking about here is still an exercise where the public can schedule or seek to schedule a tree on private property, and some planner will go along and make an assessment, I assume, from the road and with an aerial photograph or something, and say that tree has sufficient value that even though the submitter and the planner don't own the tree, they don't pay the rates on the property, they can still go along and try and protect the tree. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, that's correct, just like historic heritage buildings.
Yeah, but the point being that the Resource Management Act actually doesn't provide for general tree protection. Maybe that we should, I mean, I've always been in favour of not having general tree protection, but given the amount of urbanisation that's taking place, maybe I need to change my view and we should go to general tree protections now. But it seems to me the default position actually is that the property owner's rights ought to usurp the aspiration of the submitter who doesn't own the property. Would that be reasonable?
Through the Chair, no, I disagree. So the regional policy statement sets out what are the values associated with the tree, and while there is a consideration of the extent to which the tree may be creating a burden upon the property owner, it doesn't provide for that right of veto for the property owner to be able to exercise their ownership of the tree and then stop the regulation occurring.
And that's in accordance with the regional policy statement of the Auckland Unitary Plan, which is enabled by the RMA, but not the RMA itself, is it?
So declarations were sought through the Environment Court on what we were able to do within Auckland in relation to the protection of urban trees, and clarification was given that notable tree scheduling remained a mechanism which was available to councils. Clarification gave us the result that the general tree protection in the form which was native or exotic over a certain height, we're no longer able to be protected, but also general tree protection in the form of protection of trees associated with particular zones was identified as being a form of general tree protection and no longer allowed. So that process concluded, I think, in 2010 and has followed through as part of the preparation of the Unitary Plan Notable Tree Schedule.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Now, look, there's no other questions. There's been quite some comment already. It's moved and seconded. You want to make a comment on this, Councillor Walker? Your mic, please.
And that is when I look at the climate impact, there's very little there. So given that these trees are the most substantial trees in Auckland, I know that they store very large amounts of carbon. That is not only in the structure that's above ground, but also in the root structure, because the amount of carbon there is significant. So what is the climate impact of removing these trees? These trees also act as massive air conditioning units, and there's any amount of scientific evidence around that worldwide in terms of the quantifiable value in cities that these large trees serve. Are we informing ourselves around that when it comes to climate impact? And this goes directly to the comments that I made, I think it was yesterday, around resourcing and around whether we're actually serious about climate change. Because I come back to it again, on a decision by decision basis, and here's another one, we're just not doing it. We're not even considering it. So are we serious or not? So I guess that's a follow-on question, but frankly, what's the carbon storage of these trees? What's the impact of it?
Which trees are you referring to? The ones that are on the schedule, or the ones that have
The ones that are in
587?
the ones that are in the schedule and the other ones. Have we got even a vague idea?
Look, Teuila or Phil, I'm not sure. Teuila or Phil, do you have a reply for that?
Through the Chair, there's probably two answers. First, in relation to the measurement of the actual carbon storage held within notable trees being 1 to 1.5% of the urban tree cover, the answer is no. We do not know the extent of carbon storage in those or what the impact would be of progressing a plan change which was to add slightly to that stock. The other point, though, is in relation to climate change adaptation, and as spoken about earlier by my colleague Teuila, the natural hazard mitigation regional planning function has enabled for us to protect trees which are on cliff edge areas. So we continue to have controls within the unitary plan in urban areas that do protect that vegetation because of that climate change adaptation aspect of natural hazard risk.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got the A, B and C are there. They're moved and seconded. Can we put those to a vote?
Speaking.
I don't have any speakers that have signalled to me. So members, if you want to speak, you need to signal. Okay, Councillor Cooper, please.
I'm sorry, I was just waiting to put my hand up once the questions had finished. My understanding of this is it's not about, because this doesn't really tell you when this B would be triggered, just one day. My concern is this isn't about the money, this is about what priority we're willing to put on it. So there's always money, it's just what do you want to spend it on? So if people really want to do this, they need to put up an amendment and put that forward. But to be consistent around the money issues, I can't support it. But I find it hard to agree with B. I just always feel like we've got to have clear direction, and that's just never. And it's virtue signalling, and I'm not prepared to support it because it really is. It's like, see, we really are nice. But we're not going to do it now. We're not going to put our money where our mouth is. And that's the issue, isn't it? We could do this if we really said, right, we're going to cut something else. But we've got to have the courage to cut something else. And I don't know what we'd have to cut, $887,000 just to do option one.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, when I asked my question, I foreshadowed that I wanted to be able to comment. So I'm moving an amendment that this be deferred to the Planning Committee next month, which I think is on the 3rd of December. My reason for doing that is, as Councillor Cooper has said, it's a question of priorities. I feel that there will be a lot of people who will, in understanding what we are trying to achieve today, and I'm still a bit confused, we just don't see it as a priority. And I feel really uncomfortable with that. If you look at those issues that have proven to be highly controversial on an ongoing basis, much of that has had to do with trees, much of it's had to do with the lack of protection or otherwise, and ambiguity about different things. And I don't want this to be any criticism of our officers, and I understand that you work you have to ration the resources that you've got. But we are here as elected members to state what our priorities are. And I'm saying today, I've actually got insufficient information today to make an informed decision on this. And I've followed tree issues for a very long time. So that's my reasoning. It will give, you might not be able to have time for a workshop, but
I need to get a second. Do I have a second for that, please? It's seconded by Councillor Walker. Okay. Continue speaking to the amendment, please.
I don't want to prolong this committee here, because I think we have got too little information for the decisions that you are asking of us to take, and I believe it gives the opportunity for officers to provide more information and for a discussion to be had at Finance, so that by the 3rd of December we are in a better situation to be able to make an appropriate decision.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to have voters' remorse on it.
We've now got an amendment before us. Speakers to the amendment only, please. Councillor Walker.
So just want to speak to the amendment, and there are essentially two comments I want to make. If I look at what we're proposing to do here, this is all about cost effective, and then later it says when resources permit. So no longer are we able, apparently, to consider something on a matter of principle. No longer are we going to make decisions about what is the most appropriate, the best call. It would appear, if we pursue this kind of method, that we'll have to predicate virtually everything we do around these things. And in principle, I don't think that is desirable. So these motions have not been well crafted. In addition to that, I think there are other matters that we should be considering, and they could and should be considered later. So what it amounts to is that I think there is very good grounds for deferring this matter, so that the officers can give a little bit more thought to some of the issues raised today, so that if we do move something, it's being moved on a better basis, because this is a very bad message to put out to Aucklanders. It's not the right way to go about something. Thank you.
Are there other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Simpson.
Look, at the risk of dragging all this out, it's actually not a bad idea, Mr. Chair. You'll have had the mayoral proposal. You'll know the state of the play. And I get what Councillor Coombs trying to do, but, you know, there is always money. It's just how you choose to prioritise it. And I'm worried about the B, actually. I'm worried about the A. I'm worried about the A, B and C. But actually, I think what it will do is, as we go through the month of November, we will very clearly see how realistic that time is for when resources permit. And so it's not a bad idea, seriously.
Look, I just have a contrary view. We're 5 hours into the meeting, and at 5 hours into the meeting, somebody said they would prefer not to see this report being considered, which has surprised me. We are all very clear that there is no funding available for notable tree protection. I don't think so in the budget that we're about to confirm. I would be very surprised if it was considered a priority when you look at all the other priorities that we have. And I actually think what Councillor Coombe is, the only thing she's done to the report and the motions that Teuila was complimented on by Councillor Watson, and you should keep that, Teuila. It's a good report, and your recommendations were good. The only thing that is slightly changed is more of a positive spin has been put on the words under B. That's all that's changed. So there's no suggestion that we have a workshop here. It's sort of like a discussion at finance. But I'm sure, without doubt, the discussion at finance would be this is a shutout, considering the plight we're in. So I actually don't think we're going to learn any more at finance. Let's be honest about it, folks. We're not going to learn anything more at finance. So if the suggestion is we go to finance and just have that confirmed, then we'll be asking Teuila to write this report again. We'll probably see the same report, and we'll see it up, and we'll be doing all this again. We're now almost 2 hours into this item, and my suggestion is we deal with it. We just face up to it and we deal with it. So any other speakers to the amendment? I'll put the amendment then by division. Okay.
Councillor Casey,
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore,
Against.
Councillor Collins,
Against.
Councillor Coombe,
Against.
Councillor Cooper,
Against.
Councillor Dalton,
Against.
Councillor Fletcher, Mayor Goff,
Against.
Councillor Henderson,
Against.
Councillor Hills,
I don't even know at this point. I will go
Wait and find
again.
Councillor Hills, against, Councillor Mulholland,
For.
Councillor Newman, Member Namane,
Kind of like Councillor Hill. Against.
Councillor Sayers, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Walker, Councillor Watson, Councillor Young. Last 9 votes to 11.
Motion is lost 9 to 11. We'll go back to the speaking list for the substantial motions A, B and C. Are there other speakers? Do we have any other speakers? We don't. So we will now go to the vote on... Yeah. Oh, we do? Okay, can we put the names up, please? Councillor Hills, please.
This may become to a huge surprise, but if Councillor Simpson supports me as a second, I would prefer to amend and put the original B back. I don't know if... And I'll give my quick speaking turn on that. My main reason is because I would not prioritise that 2.5 million. It is 2.5 years of the Urban Ngāhere plan to save 500 trees that would not be saved. And we're already being told that the planning team is down about 2.5 million.
Can I just hold you there? So you're actually proposing an amendment. You haven't spoken, so you have the right to propose an amendment. Now, I would like to see us work this out. Councillor Coombe, you are the mover, I am the seconder. I'd like to resolve this. Is there a willingness, Councillor Coombe, to reconsider your change, which is the primary motion, to the original motion?
Just to clarify, the numbers that Councillor Hills is mentioning, they're not quite right. aren't they? I mean, I thought it was 800,000 for the.
871.
871 is what's required to work through the 500. It's not the two.
The other money is just to review the current trees on the schedule, isn't that?
Sorry, I need to get to the nub of this, so there's really not a lot of time to sort of to and fro on.
Yeah, I know, but also just to clarify, I mean, the report tells us what the B I've proposed is what the report says is the next steps. So I'm just positively stating what's in the report that we've been advised is going to happen.
Okay,
Is that not the case?
My question to you was, is there a willingness as the mover to consider the original motion? And look, I just need a yes or a no.
I'll remove my amendment. I can't be bothered anymore.
Okay, I'm cutting that conversation. Then we'll go to Councillor Walker, who's absent. So we will now go to the vote. Members, this is the committee of Auckland Council, and I really think we should take this a bit more seriously. I'm going to the vote then on A, B and C. Would you like all of it on division? Councillor Fletcher?
Excuse me, I would like all of it.
All of it on division. Question from Councillor Cooper?
The first one is a note, so I'm not going to, I don't want to vote against a note because it's a note. I do want to note that option 4 is the most cost effective.
Councillor Fletcher, can I take A separately, please?
I thought you were going to, and I wanted to put all vote.
Excuse me, order?
I am not seeking to be vexatious, but from my perspective, this is actually a really important issue. As chair, you don't think it is. You've already told us on behalf of the committee it's not the big priority. Well, I don't want to take
I said the funding of it.
Well, I'm sorry, that was my impression.
My question to you was about the division.
I'm well aware, and I am also trying to convey to you, I'm trying to be helpful, but I am appalled at your chairing of this, and I'm appalled that we are having this issue just put to us in such a way that it's very clumsy. So go ahead and do whatever you want.
Okay, then your call for a division is withdrawn, is it?
I've invited you to do what you like because it seems we just need a chair and not the rest of the committee.
Okay.
I'd like to call for a division, please, Chair.
Sorry, I've got somebody online. Who's that? Councillor Mulholland?
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to call for a division, please, so we can move forward. Thank you.
Okay, I'm cool. Okay, I'll call the division on A, B and C. We'll proceed with A. We're going to the vote.
Thank you, members. You're voting on A. Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Bartley.
4.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
Aye.
Councillor Collins.
4.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
Aye.
Councillor Dalton.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Mayor Goff.
Aye.
Councillor Henderson.
4.
Councillor Hills.
Aye.
Councillor Mulholland.
4.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Member Namane.
Aye.
Councillor Sayers.
4.
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart is not here, sorry. Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Young.
4.
That's carried the A, 18 votes to nil, and we will now go to the B, take the division.
On B, Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Bartley.
I have no idea. I'm gonna abstain.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
Aye.
Councillor Collins.
4.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
Abstain.
Councillor Dalton. Councillor Fletcher. Mayor Goff.
4.
Councillor Henderson.
4.
Councillor Hills.
4.
Councillor Mulholland.
4.
Councillor Newman.
No.
Member Namane.
Aye.
Councillor Sayers.
4.
Councillor Simpson? Councillor Stewart? Not here, sorry. Councillor Walker? Councillor Watson? Councillor Young? Carried 14 votes to 1. 5 abstentions.
Thank you. We'll go to the C.
C.
Go to the C now, please.
You're voting on C. Councillor
Division.
Darby?
4.
All right. Councillor Bartley?
4.
Councillor Casey?
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore? Councillor Collins?
4.
Councillor Coombe?
Aye.
Councillor Cooper?
4.
Councillor Dalton?
4.
Councillor Fletcher? Mayor Goff?
4.
Councillor Henderson?
4.
Councillor Hills?
Aye.
Councillor Mulholland?
4.
Councillor Newman?
Yes. Yep.
Member Namane?
Aye.
Councillor Sayers?
4.
Councillor Simpson? Councillor Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Watson? Councillor Young? It's carried 19 votes to 0.
Thank you.